experience to go to a building which has no roof, and the exhibits are in pieces on the floor with bricks and all sorts of other and stones, and to see, for instance, that the guards make tea on top of a part of an ancient statue, and to see a Buddha placed on next to a window so somebody will steal it from outside, and see that the 500 Greek coins have all disappeared, and so on and so forth. It was a horrible experience. I tried to do whatever I could. We safeguarded the museum, and since then now the museum is functioning, but many of the exhibits have disappeared, have been destroyed, or have been looted. But this was one indication of what happened to Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a country for 30 years in turmoil and suffers because of the intervention of outsiders mostly. As I said the other day, first of all was Soviet Union, then the proxy war between Soviet Union and the United States at the expense of the Afghans. Pakistan was always involved because they wanted to control Afghanistan. They are still involved. And the poor Afghans suffered, and they still are suffering. And if it was not for Al-Qaeda, if it was not for 9/11, I think they will still, at this moment they will be suffering under the Taliban, still, because the world had forgotten them. The moment the Soviets were thrown out, then the US and the rest of the West lost interest. So I was in a period of a civil war where nobody cared about Afghanistan. And when the Taliban appeared, they were organized by Pakistan, I decided to leave, and I resigned from the United Nations. But my contribution, I think, was in the humanitarian assistance level, where I hope I saved lives and I helped people in their horrible condition.
If I were to ask you now what you think the best method of dealing with things in Afghanistan
it is a little late. I wish this was done in 2001, when US and the rest of the Western countries did intervene in Afghanistan, correctly so. But they did it in a half-baked way, because they were distracted with Iraq. And instead of zeroing on Afghanistan, the US, under the previous administration, was, I don't want to say more because I don't want to criticize a particular government of the United States, but you understand what I say. So now President Obama tries to do whatever he can. It's late. He is sending more troops, and I hope he will also be sending more economic assistance, because you have to talk to some warlords. It's a political issue and also economic. It's the issue of survival of people, so they will not have to cultivate poppies and send heroin to the world around.
Just one more point. I know that you had mentioned that there was quite a collection of Greek coins in that museum that were lost, with the exception of 2. Is that right?
Yes, I found it in the mess there, which I gave them back. They are now in the museum. Yes, the Greek influence in Afghanistan is tremendous. And the Afghans love the Greeks because of Alexander the Great. I will tell you a joke. At one of my visits in some towns of Afghanistan, some people had a huge poster in English written, "Alexander brought us culture, Mousouris will bring us peace." I found
that is very flattering.
Incongruous. But this is an example of how they venerate, how they respect the memory of Alexander the Great. Where, by the way, they found a lot of jewelry also in Afghanistan, and you find the identical jewelry in Pella, which is in Macedonia, the Greek Macedonia, because there is another country that calls itself Macedonia, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia.
By the way, the former Republic of Yugoslavia.
The former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia.
Yeah,
yes.
You were instrumental in framing that reference, that name. Is that right?
Well, one night...
tell us the story.
I was in the political affairs of the United Nations, and the Secretary General at that time, Boutros Ghali, had sent Cyrus Vance for a visit to Yugoslavia. It was the time that Yugoslavia was being dismembered. And he came back with a report for the Security Council mentioning the presidents he had met. At that time, only Serbia and Croatia were members of the United Nations. And he mentioned there that he met the president of Serbia, Croatia, etc., and Macedonia. Well, I said this is not correct, and I checked with Cyrus Vance, and I proposed him to replace it with former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, because I thought as a temporary solution that was the best.
Yeah.
And it stuck. And the official name is still former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia until this country and Greece agree on a name, because this is a decision of the Security Council calling these two countries to get together and agree on a name.
You've said that the Greeks, of course, have an important positional role as well as conceptual role as between the East and the West. And I wonder if you'd address a little bit that historical push and pull that is related to Greece and its loyalties between these two parts of the world.
The Greeks were always curious people, and the geography of the country, provokes that. They wanted to see what is behind a mountain. The mountain was not so high, so they could go.
Oh, so you feel the curiosity of the Greeks is related to the landscape?
The landscape, yes. And I think the landscape explains many things about the character of people. And they expanded in the Mediterranean in the antiquity, especially Eastern Mediterranean, around the coast, all over. Then when the Persians came and they were defeated, because the Greeks stopped the Persians from entering Europe twice, then Alexander in 340 decided to take away this threat, and he entered and defeated the Persian army, and then he went up to India. I don't say conquered, because his idea was to integrate the people in a rather universal state, which is beyond nationality, beyond ethnicity. He wanted to have a multi-ethnic big empire. But he died when he was 33. But this expansion of Greekness had some influence, because first of all influenced the East. The language was Greek. That's why 3 of the 4 evangels, how do you call it? The apostles wrote in Greek originally of the New Testament. So we had an effect on the East, and the East had an effect on us. At a later stage, of course, we started a dialogue with the West, where the Romans came, and eventually after the Byzantine Empire, when the Ottoman Turks came, Greece had influences from both West and East. And we played a role in the Renaissance, I would say, after the arrival of the Ottoman Turks. Since Greece has become independent in 1830, the creators of the country, the leaders of the country at that stage, they wanted Greece to espouse, to adopt Western institutions, which they did. But there was some resistance from the point of view of peasantry, who were used to the Eastern ways. So that was a sort of always some idea of an ambiguity and some conflict, but without fighting, of course. Now, the Greek romance, as I said, with the East, was given an end in 1922, when 1 million Greeks were expelled from Turkey and came as refugees to Greece. And later, in the 20th century, around the Second World War, Greeks from Russia and from Egypt also were expelled. So the relations with the East are limited. We are members of the European Union, members of NATO, so Greece is an integral part of the West, although some traits of the East still remain.
Okay, so there is still that texture of
Yes,
the
in
East.
music, in food, and architecture, and so on and so forth.
If I were to ask you to critique or to perhaps talk about the strengths and the difficulties of Greek society right now, what would you tell us?
Well, the Greek society has some difficulties because it became rather, not all, but many people rich suddenly without the proper education, some of them. So they tend to behave like newly rich. And that has some repercussions, and that is worrisome. Education is not the way it should have been, and we have right now some unpleasant explosions of not only of young people, but also of some criminal elements, some immigrants who are really desperate, because we have a lot of immigrants from various countries of the south and the east. But mainly it is a reaction of a certain way of living of society, especially the elite, in quotes, which creates a reaction to many people, and they resent it.
We're almost out of time, but I wonder if you would do something a little bit simple for us here, and that is think in terms of an American going to Greece for, say, 10 days. Could you give us a very quick thumbnail itinerary of what you would say are must-see
Okay.
items?
First of all, you go to Acropolis
To
see the fantastic rock, and then go to the Museum of Acropolis, which is next door.
Which will be open by soon.
Will be open, yes, either in June or in September. Then you go to Lykavitos, it's another hill which has a church in top. It's the two main hills of Athens. It's very interesting. One has a pagan temple, Parthenon, and the other has an Greek Orthodox Christian small church. From there you will see the city. And then you go to a Benaki Museum, which has the history of Hellenism and up to today, very interesting museum. The Archaeological Museum. See the stadium where the first Olympic Games took place, it's all marble, and then go to the sea.
Okay.
Go to Sunion, go to Hydra, there are so many beautiful islands.
Well, I hope to be able to do that one day soon.
Please do it.
And I want to thank you very much for being with us
today. I hope I'll see you
today.
when you come.
Thank you, Dr. Mousouris.
Thank you very much, and thank you, through you, Drexel University, for hosting me here with such politeness and such warmth.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today at the Drexel interview.